We're missing Ryan and Cassie and who else?
Valentius?
Oh yeah, I call him Vlad. I'm not sure what his name is.
Yeah, he wasn't coming, so.
We have a quorum, Michelle?
We do.
I'll call to order the Budget Advisory Committee of the City of Tarpon Springs at 2 p.m. Roll call.
Chair Banther,
Here.
Vice Chair Hales,
Here.
Mr. Dodger is absent, Mr. Kouros is absent, Mr. McCloy,
Here.
Ms. Hall is absent, and Mr. Bergman.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, so we will start with a discussion of golf course financials. I assume it's Ron Herring.
Good evening, committee, or good afternoon. They put these curtains down and just, it's like 9 o'clock at night, or earlier it was very light in here and stuff. We brought those down, but you might be wondering, why are we talking about the golf course? But you might know because, we've talked about it. We've had the financial updates on the golf course, but and a lot of it due to just the last couple of years, 2020 and 2019, they were closed for parts of those years. So I'm down roughly about $400,000 in revenues. And just to start a little bit of history on the golf course, I got in the slides here, but some other stuff, just not sure if you know, but the city leased a golf course through 1996, took over the operations, of course, in 96. And when they took it over, it was in pretty rough shape since the leasee put no money into it. The golf course financial negative position began in 1999 and has never recovered. Fund attained a negative balance of $1 million in 2009 and basically has hovered right around there since. We had a working plan with the previous auditors with a gradual reduction with a plan for elimination in 2029. But again, that you need to have the revenues to have that plan succeed. Like I said, plan dependent on revenues, attaining a minimum of maybe probably about 1.35 million revenues a year. And we eliminated, no capital being expended there. And we finally eliminated the Interfund transfer last year. Like I say, all that of the above are met, except for the past 2 years. Revenues average 1.15 million the past 2 years. So we're short about $400,000 in revenues of that goal. With the loss in revenues, our plan went in the opposite direction. Our new auditors that we got this year recommended we do either a transfer or a loan to solve the deficit. On some good news, I think this year is being one of its better years that it's had. And with that, I'll get into my brief presentation here. And as mentioned, the golf course was leased through 1995. Rental income was $200,000 a year or plus, depending on the revenues they got. And those revenues went into the general fund. The city took over the operation in January of 1996. We set up an enterprise type fund as its own golf course fund. The financial information since 1997, the operating revenues have averaged 1.3 million per year. Operating expenses, including transfers to the general fund, but not capital, have averaged almost 1.4 million, 1,374,000 per year. Capital outlay from 97 to 2020 has been a little over $2 million. And the total interfund transfers to the general fund from the golf course fund have been about 4.9 million. Now, if you can see this, what I've got here is the red line is the expenditures over since 96 here to 2020. You've got the expenditures, a red line over that time period. Then you've got the blue line, which is the revenues over that same time period. And as you can see, there's not very many times the blue line is over the red line, which is not good. We're not getting revenues over the expenses. Down here, I'm just trying to show the interfund transfers where they began here. They went up to 300,000 and interfund transfers to the general fund average about 275,000. Then we brought them down to 134,000. And then we gradually decreased it here to for 2020, the first year we did no transfer to the general fund. Capital expenses over this period of time is a green bar here. In here we had irrigation system. That year it was 310,000, but there were some other expenses in these other years for that total irrigation system improvements. In 2007, right around 2006, 7, and 8, we had maintenance and cart building improvements. And then we rebuilt the greens in 2014. And that line there, the green line, is your 2 million of capital expenditures that were expensed to the golf course enterprise fund. The 2 million of capital expenditures charged to the course over the period covered cart pass, irrigation system, bridges, maintenance, cart buildings, rebuild greens, and driving range tee box. After 2015, we put a sort of stop and said, we can't do any more capital here. If you have capital, it's got to be charged probably to the penny fund. So we stopped the capital being charged unless it was small stuff like computers or something. So here's the total capital expenditures of the $2 million. We did do some interfund loans in 2006, 190,000. It paid off. 2010, 430,000, it's paid off. And we currently have one in 2014, we did 180,000 and the balance is 140,000. We have a CIP surcharge when they play golf, but we get about 38, 39, 40,000, and that's what's used to pay down the debt. So the net amount of the capital expenditures, 2 million minus the loans, meant there was a 1.2 million where there was no loans taken out. The interfund transfer, a little history of that. 96 to 2019, I saved it for 4.9 million of transfers to the general fund. Like I say, the transfer amount, 275,000 per year from 96 to 2010. And that averages 20% of revenues at that time. Since then, like I mentioned before, we've gradually reduced that to its elimination in 2020. The plan to eliminate the negative balance the past 6 years, I've mentioned, we've stopped the capital being charged unless it's minor stuff. We have finally eliminated interfund transfer. The plan was dependent on revenues averaging 1.35 million a year. But the last 2 years, 2019-20, we're about 400,000 below in revenues due to the weather in 2019 because of the flooding and parts of the course closed. And then in 2019, the course was closed for COVID for about a month and a half. Plan going forward, still no capital charge to the golf course fund. If you have capital any major, probably the penny fund, recreation, or the general fund, no more interfund transfer. Use of American Rescue Plan funding for revenue loss, if we find out if that's allowable. Options for balancing remaining after use of the American Rescue Plan consist of a transfer from the general fund to eliminate the negative balance, set up interfund loan from general fund or another fund to be paid back over time, or a combination of both, transfer from the general fund and a loan from general fund or another fund. And then also on an annual basis, maybe budget about 100,000 a year, approximately 50 to 100,000. So if they have a year where there's a revenue shortage, be ready, they would have the money in the general fund to transfer to the golf course fund. And with that, open up for any questions.
Anybody have questions or comments? We good? All right, number 2, water and sewer sufficiency study.
I guess on the golfers, didn't know if you all had any recommendations or any thoughts on that, or
Is there any option just to sell it? Has become a private enterprise outside the city?
I'm sure there is, but that's probably that's a board of directors. I'd have to consider that, but
I don't think it does. I mean, and it went through back when I was in office. I don't think it. It's not like you had always said. There was some years where it was almost neutral, right? It wasn't too negative.
correct.
You're going to have ebbs and flows, but I think net, it's not as terrible as some other municipal golf courses are.
Correct. They're all struggling just like we are. And, but it's the last 2 years, like I say, it really stood out seeing, the going down another 400,000. Like I say, this year we're about almost 400,000 to the better since we're having such a good year with the course. And I'm hoping last summer we saw our best summer of revenues. I think after COVID, people wanted to go back out and do something. So we had one of our better summers last summer. So I'm sort of curious if that continues this summer. But We're going to monitor it, this summer, probably I'm thinking by the end of this fiscal year, see where we end up. And then if we do, leave it up to the board if they want to do a transfer, a loan, or a combination, and we'll see where we go for there.
Always a good time when you're on the upswing
Yeah,
to look at the potential of selling. Because unless you're one of those straight line forecaster, it's going to keep on up and up and up and up. It's probably not going to happen.
okay.
And I'm a kind of an avid, or was an avid golfer. And I hate to even think I'm going to say that, but have we looked at other alternatives? It's a big piece of land.
I'm not sure if they've looked at other alternatives.
Well, you mentioned a lot of other courses are struggling too,
Correct.
and I don't see that changing in the near term because the people who play golf aren't the younger people who are coming up. It's the older people,
Right.
and that's not going to change. So I don't see how, with all the courses are out there, some of them are going to have to go. They can't all survive
Right.
in this environment.
Yeah, like I say, we're doing better this year. And to see how the summer continues, if we are like last summer and we see the continuation of that. But it's not enough to overcome the $1 million deficit right away. It's going to take some time. If it's doing a loan for 10 years or a transfer from the general fund to cover part of it and try to nip it in the bud and bring it down some.
Any other comments or questions or anything? Okay. Water and sewer, Ron? I assume that's you.
Just so right. Hold up. Well, let me just give a little background on this. You might have heard we're having a water and sewer revenue sufficiency study being done. And this presentation is a consultant's, but I just thought I'd give you a little premise before there. The water and sewer revenue sufficiency studies have been performed between every 1 and 3 years for the past. I went back in the files and I could see probably 30 years or so. The studies take into account all past historical information, project costs for the next 10 years to try to project them out, and then come up with the proposed rates that will have recover those costs. The last study was performed in 2018. Studies have been performed for almost 30 years, first by Burton and Associates, which was later folded under Stantec. The same employees from Burton have been working with the city of Tarpon Springs for 20 plus years, so they have a good working knowledge of our system. They also work with 130 communities within Florida and almost all the cities within Pinellas County. So they have a good knowledge of not only our city, but all the other cities in the area. The 2018 water and sewer rates were approved for 10 years through 2028 with increases of 2.75% a year. In the current proposed study, we have 5 years of history. What is good, we have 5 years of history with the new water plant. We feel we have a good history to evaluate the financial numbers. We have evaluated all the key assumptions within the model. We were also able to use impact fees for certain allowable capital projects. And the premise with the new water plan has been that we would be able to moderate the rate of the rate increases after going online in 2015. And as you will see, the result has left us with 2 options. Both options fund all planned expenditures, leave adequate fund balances, no debt is required, and keeps the city in compliance with bond covenants. Option 1 is no rate increase for 3 years, and then 2.75% increase annually thereafter. Option 2 is a 2.2% rate reduction first year, no increases year 2 and 3, and then 3.75% increase annually thereafter. And with that, let me get to the presentation. And the plan is a 10-year financial management plan based upon current and available information, as I mentioned, evaluation of assumptions, the growth, spending, cost inflation, And it determines a sufficiency of rate revenue to fund the system requirements. Like I say, last updated by Stantec in 2018. And in October 1st, 2018, they were in the current past set of 10 years, but they decreased the last year from hit the wrong button there. They went down from 6.75% to 4%. And then in the current plan from 2020 to 2028, we're at 2.75% per year. When they start the revenue study, they first come to finance and they want a lot of numbers. So we give them all the audited financial numbers for 2020 and all the rate revenues, the growth rate increases. We give them the budget for 2021. And then Mr. Smith and his department, they get together all the 10-year capital spending that they're planning on for the next 10 years. Within the assumptions, you've got the connection growth. We went to 75 units of new connections a year. Operating and maintenance, 3.78% cost escalation. Spending execution at 95%. A lot of years when we went back to look, we weren't spending all 100% of the O&M costs. We're about 95%. Capital spending execution, we're about 75%. Interfund transfer is in the model at 8% of operating revenue. And over here were the numbers based on the last study. This is a graph, if you can see it. The current study through 2028 here, this is the growth in the monthly bills from year to year. Option number one plan is this gray bar right here. That is gray. And it's keeping the rates the same for 3 years, but then going out in the out years. And you will notice that it gets less than this green. That is a green bar right there. This green bar is a rate reduction plan of the 2.2%, which brings a monthly bill. The monthly bill is based on an average of 6,500,000 gallons used. 65, I thought that sounded big. 6,500 gallons, unless you use a lot or I use a lot, 6,500 a month. So it's like there was a 2.2% reduction, $113 bill a month, 113, and then going back up. And as you can see, and it goes up higher than the rate freeze plan due to in the out years, the increases are 3.75% versus 2.75% here for the option number one. So as you can see, both these bring us down below the current plan that's already approved. And we just highlighted here that we're planning on doing another rate study, but in further talks, we might be doing rate studies every year, which we have done in the past. We've had the rate studies done every year to see how we're doing. This chart here shows the rate freeze plan, the monthly bills. 2022, $115.57 is the monthly bill, those 3 straight years, and then increasing 2.75% a year. The rate reduction plan of the 2.2%, it goes down the average bill $113 a month, 113 staying the same, 113 no increase, but then going up 3.75% in 2025. And I think in 2028 is when this bill is lower than the rate freeze, but at this point, this is when the monthly bill starts to increase over the rate freeze plan. Like I said, both plans have sufficient fund to identify requirements. No debt is required. Monthly bill lower than the local average by 2024, and you'll see a graph on that. The typical monthly bill significantly lower than the status quo. We're calling the current plan the status quo, the one around at the 2.75%. Option one, by 2028, it's $10.91 less per month on your bill. Option two is $8.75 less per month versus the status quo bill in 2028. Now, we always like to present these graphs, and plus since our consultant works with every other city, they know all the rates. What's interesting, in 2018, I don't know if you can see that, we're the blue bar here. We were third in the water and sewer rates. 2021, the current year, we went down a couple. We were from 3 to number 5 here. Now we're at $115 average monthly bill. And then we projected out, since the consultant knows all the cities and what their projections are. We've got the 2024 projected where we would be. But this is based on option 2, the rate reduction plan. We would move down to number 7. So we've gone from number 3 to number 5 to number 7, and we're also below the average here. So we brought it down during these periods of time. And with the rate reduction plan, the cumulative monthly bill change from 2018 to 2024 would be the $7.76. So we're near the bottom there. We're almost there. But this is a percentage increase. We are at the bottom during this period of time. We'd only have gone up from that 2018 to 24, 1.2%. The updates result in less near rate term pressure than they had forecast in 2018. The status quo plan, which is the one we're currently on, builds available fund balance for capital projects. The 3-year rate freeze is sufficient to fund the forecast requirements. The 1-year rate reduction requires greater overall rate increases. That's in those later years, since we have the 2.2% reduction here, but then it goes out to 3.75% the last few years. And so between the city and the consultant, we're recommending adopt either option 1 or 2, then reevaluate in 2024. But we might be, if we're doing another study next year, we'd be reevaluating it next year. And that's the end of that presentation. Open it up for any questions.
Thank you, Ron. Questions, comments, anybody? Don't see any. Thank you, Ron.
Yeah, I guess we're just trying to see, we'll get your thoughts on,
Should we make a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners of what we
Good
think?
point.
Probably not yet, because the board is going to be seeing it for the first time on Tuesday night. I think they wanted you to see it as they look at it. This is not a final. In fact, it's a presentation item up in discussion. So I think there'll be a lot of discussion Tuesday night, which way they want to go or what they want to do or what additional information. Then it'll come back for a final vote. And I think in between that time, they may look to you again, but they haven't even had time to look, see what more information they want. So kind of, I think they were looking for you to get introduced to it and kind of let us know we seem to be on the right track. And then between the time of them reviewing it and what they decide Tuesday night, again, there'll be another meeting down the road where this is finalized, and that's when they'll probably want it to come to you for the recommendation.
All right. Any other thoughts or comments on number 2? You good? Okay. Number 3, the 2022 proposed budget introduction.
Okay, now on to the budget. And sorry, let's get my screen. Sorry about that. Not yet.
Did you say you had some written copies? Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought you mentioned that.
I figured you'd ask for that.
Yeah, I know. You got them.
Okay, under the budget. And I apologize, we got a little bit behind with it. We had more audits we had to do this year. So I wanted to have the executive summary done. In fact, I think Shane's got it done. Shane's our financial analyst sitting up there. He does all the hard work and stuff, but it's ready, but we're still, proofreading it and checking it and stuff like that. I just wanted to go over the financials real briefly in COVID-19 and then the 22 budget, and then try to set up your timetable, what's going on with the budget, and then probably what you all want to plan for meeting with the department heads. And just wanted to go over COVID-19, and this is comparing 2020. Oops, I'll get these buttons straight here. Going over 2020 actuals, how it ended up to 2019. Basically, we were down revenue loss of 721,000 due to COVID that we've identified in 2020. We're hoping that American Rescue Plan money will help us recover some of that revenue loss. As you can see, I put the taxes up here and then some other items down here, recreation, cultural, interest. And this is continuing the same format, but continuing into the current year, trying to just follow it this year to see how we're doing. The first 6 months of the year, we have seen some improvement. Revenue sharing is still a set amount because that's set by the state in June. So that's why that's the main one, is a 6,000 negative a month here. I'm hoping they do a revenue adjustment in June after the end of the state's fiscal year, which is June. And I'm hoping we'll recoup some of this, because I think when they set this amount, it was back last June in the middle of the pandemic. And the other one that's really, we've been lacking some revenues is the gas tax. Obviously, not as many people traveling, so we're down 11,000 right there. So in total, down about $3,700 in these particular taxes right here for this current year, for the first 6 months. Other revenues affected in this through April this year, the recreation fees down 20,000, cultural down 44,000, and interest earnings 131,000 for a total of 195,000. Getting to expenditures, so far we've had about $607,000 worth of expenditures through the end of March. We did submit for and received $524,000 as part of the Pinellas County got money under the Pinellas Cares Local Government Coronavirus Relief Fund. So we got $524,000 to help offset this. The difference between here, we can still get some FEMA money. We're working on that. And we can still, even going into the future, try to follow it and keep track of our expenses and get those reimbursements from FEMA. This wasn't all the expenses. The police, we've broken out separately because they got their own grant from the Department of Justice for $112,000. So the police chief is monitoring this and submitting monthly for his all his expenses related to COVID-19. Just briefly, I don't know if you've heard I mentioned American Rescue Plan a couple of times here. The bill was passed on March 11, 2021. All details are still being worked out. The city will receive 2 payments from U.S. Treasury, but they flow through the state. Since we're considered a non-entitlement city, populations under 50,000, the money goes to the state, and then the state sends it to the cities. So the Treasury is supposed to submit the money within 60 days from March 11th, and then the state is required to send it to the city within 30 days from which would be May 11th. So I'm thinking, I've got on my calendar June 11th that we should have some money in our account. But the state could file for an extension. If they're saying, oh, we're getting overwhelmed or something, they could say, well, we need another month to send the money out. Or they're holding on to it and gaining some interest. And the second payment from what they said would come a second year later. So we'd get 50% in hopefully June or July, and the balance a year later. A lot of it is still being worked out, all the details, what you can use it for. A lot of it's dealing with public health emergency, essential workers. I put in bold here what's probably more that we will be able to use it for, or we can use it for any loss in revenues we've had. Also, another thing is make necessary investments in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. In later items from the treasury, we've seen the word stormwater in there. And we're trying to, somebody saw roads and streets too, but it's still not clear, and we're still waiting for more guidance. All funds must be spent by December 31st, 2024. But in latest guidance, we found that on some of these big projects, if you have it encumbered by 2031-24, you're okay. You have still until 2026 to spend the money. And like I say, further guidance is forthcoming on this. A little financial update for 2021. Yeah, as you can say, we're 7 months into the year, and most revenues are meeting budget except for the revenue sharing and the gas tax, a little below. As we mentioned, we're doing the water and sewer revenue sufficiency study. We did buy a fire truck last week for $846,000, 5-year lease at 1.75%. We thought that was pretty decent. They were a little higher. We worked with them and we got it down to 1.75%. We did purchase some electric vehicles on a lease with a savings of $6,200. Another thing coming up is the county is proposing an additional 1 to 5 cent gas tax. Next, I think the county needs to approve it by October. That would provide us another $250,000 annually a year. And that's an estimate for transportation capital purposes. Just talking a little about investments. You know, I'm maintaining them short. I keep watching. I hear a lot about inflation and when is the market going to go up? So I'm trying not to go out too far on investments. I've got a lot of investments. I got $1 million a month maturing for the next year, I know I got a couple over a year. 1 million a month. So if the market does go up, I've got it laddered out like that. I did buy a couple of step bonds. These are federal agencies which have increases built into them. So I felt comfortable buying those because they have, so if the market does go up, the interest rate goes up about every 6 months. Debt, we made the water plant interest payment in April. The ladder truck we got last year, we made the second payment for $239,000 last month. Internal auditor, we had the payroll timekeeping. It was a positive report. It was very time consuming, a lot of hours into this report, especially a finance department, but it has had one department and the recommendation is they have to have the manager sign off on the hours proof listing. For timekeeping written procedures, some departments just had like 1 page on their procedures. But other departments maybe had print screens and multiple pages on it. They said, well, get those departments that just have 1 page and sort of a little bit more detail on their procedures. And as like I say, we had a bunch of audits in March. That's when they're required to be done. We had the city audit, clean opinion, no comments. We had to do a whole separate CRA audit the first time this year, required by the state, similar to the city audit, but just for the CRA. And it's every year we always have to do the fire audit and the EMS audit. And all these, like I say, were clean with no opinions, no comments. And the fire and audit, usually if we don't spend all our money, we got to send it back to them, which I don't like to do. But again, we didn't have to send any money. They look to make sure the money they give us, it's all being spent. So we have spent it all, which is good. So we don't have to send any money back to them. And we got the budget award. We just got notified, I think it was Monday, that we got the budget award for last year's budget. And a lot of that goes thanks to Shane and all his hard work on the budget. Like I say, getting into the budget now, budget process to date, the departments have entered their budget. We've developed a payroll, revenue projections, funds have been balanced. We have had to use $266,000 of unassigned fund balance, the unrestricted, to balance the general fund. But the use, unassigned could be reduced. If we have some expenditure cuts, if you all go through and find some things and working with the departments. I've estimated the taxable values at 4.5%. I have a contact down there and they really gave me that it was a little bit higher than this, but I brought it down a little bit because the official estimate comes out June 1st. So I budgeted 4.5%. And insurance estimates like health insurance, I budgeted an 8% increase. If that comes less, that might help. So if we have some of these, we might be able to reduce or eliminate the use of the unassigned fund balance. Getting into some of the numbers. And I know you've all probably read the budget book already, so no. The total budget, as it's currently stands, is a 66 million. Last year was 63. This was the original approved budget, increase of $3 million, 4.77%. And then I like to bring up the 5 largest funds because they take up 90% of the budget. You know, the general fund, increase of $1 million, 4.02%. Water and sewer fund, increase of 2.3 million, 12%. Sanitation fund, increase of 89,000, 1.44%. Penny fund went down a little bit, some less capital projects, 17% went down. Stormwater fund up about 95,000, 5%. How I go about the revenue projections, as you probably might know already, but I go back to the historicals, 2018, 19, 20. But we also compare March of the current year to the 2 previous years to see how we're doing. And then we also take into account, you know, what's going on, COVID-19, and how's the economy doing? Our gas price is going up. So I bumped up gas prices, I think 15, 20% in the budget. And as mentioned in the general fund property taxes, I projected a 4.5% increase. Millage rate is still at the 5.37. Property appraiser is going to send the official estimate June 1st. July 1st, they send the official estimate, official amount at that point in time, which the city will vote on to approve with the millage rate. What I'm trying to show you, if you can see it, is the main cost increases that are in the budget. Starting, we have no new positions in the budget. There is 2 new positions in this current year due to cybersecurity and stuff for the water and sewer fund. Police union contract that was approved, about 233,000 increase. Fire contract, 131,000. And I put in funding for 3% for all the rest of the general employees, comes to 450,000. Over here, I show the general fund portion, which totals 623,000. Health insurance, I budgeted 8%, 308,000 total for the city. Total costs, a little under 4.2 million. General fund portion, 206,000. Dental and life were under a 2-year contract, so they will remain at the 121,000 for the year and 50,000 for life insurance. Long-term disability, I budgeted 7.5% increase, $2,800 increase, total cost 41,000. General fund 2,000. The actuary reports, I've budgeted 637,000 for the police and 787,000 for fire. I just got those reports last night. It's looking like this might be a little bit less, so I might have about 20,000 I can reduce from these if we pay the lump sum payment like we did last year. Workers' compensation increase. And some of these we won't find out until August, some of these and the health insurance, but $53,000 increase, total 534,000 for the city for workers' comp. General fund portion, 36,000. Property liability, budgeted increase of 10%, increase of 74,000, total of 823,000, 38,000 for the general fund. So the total increases for the city citywide is 1.3 million. For the general fund of all these, it's 1 million. For the total city, just trying to show you the different revenue sources. Taxes is 18 million of the total $66 million budget. As you see, the larger amount is the 30 million, which is made up mostly of water and sewer, stormwater, sanitation charges. And the charges for services are 46% of the total revenues of the total city. Expenses of the total city by category. As you can see, the highest number is 29 million of the budget. Total city budget is personnel costs, which and 44% of that is personnel costs for the city. I threw in this graph here. I didn't have it last year, but thought, well, maybe they want to know how many employees. Well, we've got full-time employees, 323. The most is 211 in the general fund. Full and part-time, 367. 235 in the general fund. Getting into the general fund budget, as we mentioned earlier, there's a $1 million increase, 4.4%, mostly due to pay increases, benefits, insurance increases. The revenues to the general fund, largest portion is the 15 million, which a good portion of that is property taxes at a little over 10 million. Like I say, taxes are 54% of the general fund budget, as shown here. I always like to look at the top 10 revenues of the general fund. And of course, property taxes of the increase is the 452,000. Utility tax electric comes at a second, 181,000. So the top 10 are 828,000 of the $1 million of $1 million of the increase, or 3.99%. The top 10 revenues are 77% of the revenue budget. I always like to show this graph every year of the property taxes, which involves the components that make it up. Millage rate, going back where it went down to 4.30 back in 2008, and then went up to 5.45 in 2010. Has never gone down since. Went to 5.42 and 5.37 from there on out, which is still that. Taxable values, went up to 1.9 million there and billion, I'm sorry, in 2008. During what was called the Great Recession, it went down to almost 1.3 billion in 2013. And then has creeped back up here. This is an estimate here I put in of the 4.5% over the current rate for this year, the 2,125,000,000. And when you take that, the millage rate times taxable values, you get the revenues. And if this is going down, this is also going down also with our general fund revenues, where we had 8.1 million back in 2007. 2013 went down to 6.7 million. And budgeted currently for this year for the general fund is 10,680,000 there. I threw in this brown bar just to take out of curiosity, take back here and just increase it 3% a year, what we would be. So we're, as a measuring stick, we're almost back up to that if we had increases in the taxable values of 3% a year. Getting in the general fund expenditures, of course, the biggest expense in the general fund is almost 21 million is personnel, which is almost 75% of the budget. I just thought I'd mention the CRA since it is one of our major funds and it's a separate audit on it. Created by Florida statutes, established in 2001, expires in 30 years from 2001. The approximate area of it from alternate 19 to Mears to Sponge Docks, one or two blocks east and west of alternate 19. In the base year, the taxable value was 41 million. Taxable values over this base year are what are used for the calculation for the money that goes into the CRA from both the city and the county. And it's called tax increment financing. Have you ever heard that term, TIF? Just to show you the calculation, if you're interested, the city portion, here's that base year. Here's what I've projected at the 4.5%. Here's the increase at the city millage rate would be bringing 298,000 into the CRA fund. From the county would pay in over the base year here. Here's the increase, the county's millage rate. We will get 297, almost 298,000 from the county. In the water sewer fund, the second largest fund with a budget at 21.2 million, increase of 2.3 million. Most of it's personnel, a lot of it's a capital cost. As we say, a revenue sufficiency study and process. Current approved rates, as we went over, a 2.75% increase annually. Proposed budget on one of the scenarios. I based the budget on one of the proposed scenarios. I went to the 2.2% decrease in rates, always thinking we can go up. At the 2.2% rate decrease, it's a 4.95% decrease from the current approved rates called the status quo. The largest revenues in the water and sewer fund, the water sales 9.8 million, sewer 6.6. Reclaim sales, 438, almost 438,000 for a total of almost 17 million. The water and sewer revenues, as mentioned, the total revenues, charges for services, almost 18 million. It's 83% of the revenues. Water and sewer expenditures. The largest expenditure is the capital at 6.4 million in this budget. It's an increase of 1.7 million. I say it's 30.4% of the water and sewer budget. Getting to the sanitation fund, third largest fund with a budget of 6.3 million. They have an increase of 89,000 over last year's approved budget. Largest revenues are the sanitation fees at 4.8 million, recycling fees 651,000, and tipping fees 464,000. So those total almost 6 million of the 6.3 million of the budget, 94%. We are going out for bid for sanitation recycling services for next year. The bids are going out now and they'll be looked at probably in the next month. This is the contractor expenses that we're currently paying the contractor. We've got budget. So for solid waste, about 4 million. Recycling contractor, 543,000. Yard waste contractor, 276,000 for a total of almost 4.9 million. And as mentioned, we're going out for bid for sanitation recycling services.
Can I ask you a quick question? Do you
Sure.
know when the last time we bid that out?
Five years ago. Yeah. Something you keep talking so I could take a drink.
Yeah. Real dry. So it's currently waste management.
Correct. Waste management for solid waste and
Normally
recycling.
look for a multi-year contract, and is it fixed in the price?
The bid went out for a 5-year contract.
Okay.
In the sanitation, the revenues, as you probably know, 6.2 million, it's charges for services of the revenues. That says 98% of the revenues. Expenses, 5.1 million, that's paying the contractors, which is 81% of the expenditures. Getting a little bit of stormwater fund, fifth largest fund. Got a budget of 1.8 million. Per the current, it goes up 50 cents a year, so it would go up to $9.15 per equivalent stormwater unit. The rates have been approved through 2025, increasing to 50 cents annually. We did put in the budget next year to do another revenue sufficiency study to review the revenues, expenses, a 10-year CIP, and what the rates should be. Stormwater, the revenues, as we probably mentioned, it's 1.8 million of charges for services, which is 100% of the revenues. Expenditures, the largest expenditure is personnel, the 695,000, which is 32% of the expenses. I always like to throw in, if looking for revenue opportunities, building permit fees, but I think this is coming up in a workshop next month. Streetlights, the city absorbs all the cost of streetlights. Some cities, charge this out to the citizens. I'm not sure if that's popular, but we always try to pursue all grant opportunities. Some cities do fire service fees, but sometimes that's not popular. Sometimes if they mention those things, they say, okay, if you're going to increase the fire fees, we need to reduce the millage rate. If we needed to do debt financing, it's not a bad time. There's low rates out there. I know Dunedin just got bids on, they're doing $20 million city hall, and they got bids between 1.3 million and 1.3% interest rate to 1.9% interest rate on the $20 million project. If we had to increase the millage rate, 0.01, like going from 5.37 to 5.38 would increase revenue $20,000. If we went up 0.05, it'll be an increase of $100,000 in revenue. Just throw in some numbers of some of the larger CIP projects. We got the water and sewer fund, replace water line under alternate 19 bridge. 950,000, raw water wells, 850,000, solar efficiency, 650,000. A lot of work to a Lime Huey Station rehab construction, 1.1 million. And then we've got the police vehicles, 400,000. We got the sports light complex lighting and improvements. This, I think, was called Field 4 out there, 400,000. We've applied for the grant. We're trying to wait to see if we see this grant where it pay 50% of the 400,000. And we've got Brick Street and Road reconstruction in the budget for 300,000, sidewalk improvements, 100,000. And of these projects, about 4.7 million of the larger CIP projects. Just getting into the budget timetable here, as they say, I guess probably maybe what you all decide today is meetings with the departments, if you're doing them on the next Thursdays at 2:00. July 1st, the property appraiser gives us a certified taxable values. July 12th, budget to the commission. July 20th, first budget workshop with the Board of Commissioners. July 27th, the City Commission would establish the maximum millage rate. July 29th, second budget workshop. Third one on August 12th. First public hearing scheduled for September 7th. And then September 23rd would be the second and final public hearing. And I guess for y'all, that's, setting your meeting dates with the departments. Is there anything you would like to request from departments in their presentations? And are any information I can give you to help make your job a little easier? I know last year, I think somebody asked for percentages. So within our program, you'll see on the expenditure report, you'll see on the far right, a little column that shows expenditure increases, decreases. And I think on the revenue report, I didn't put percentages, but I put the dollar amount that there's increasing. So with that, I'm done.
Thanks, Ron. Appreciate it. Any questions, comments? Vice Chair, you got anything?
One question, back on the capital, the 100,000 in sidewalk improvements. What, is that anything to do with that sidewalk fund that came up in the charter review that we're to spend? so
Yes,
much?
that's
Okay,
part of
so
that.
That's where that's from. Okay, the one other thing I would like, I noticed you had a slide of revenue opportunities. I would also like just a slide of cost reduction opportunities. Other than, I know some of your estimates are the healthcare costs and that so forth, but I think this is the first time I remember that the first pass, we've had to dip into the general fund to balance it. So that's a little concerning. So I'd like to see some cost reduction opportunity ideas just on a large scale right now.
You're looking for some ideas from the departments
Or just you in general, other than,
Okay.
I know we might make it up in the health cost or whatever, but it, I just don't want to go in having to borrow from the general fund to balance it
Right.
on the first pass.
And maybe along that same, I know I've sensed from the last few years, you budget relatively conservatively. Just some of those areas with the list that you pointed out, that there's maybe opportunities. There may be, I grant, at this point, like the healthcare. There were a few, just to know where those are, because I help me if I'm off on this. Was one of the early slides showing the budget overall increasing by about 4.7%.
I think that was a total overall budget from the
Yes.
66 million from the 63 million.
Hey, that's just two numbers. Love to see that get squeezed a little bit.
Yeah. I think some of
That's,
that,
in my opinion, an aggressive expenditure.
so bringing down the total city budget.
Yeah. I'd just like to see what those opportunities.
I think a good portion of that is the additional capital in the water and sewer fund, about that 1.7, 1.8 million is a part of that.
Will we see some additional detail on that?
On the
I
capital.
recall, yes.
I sent it out in the email. I sent two documents. One had the capital that's in the budget, and we also sent out a document of capital requests that are not in the budget.
And you,
I've got copies if you
that's
need
been
them.
your modus operandi the last few years. There's all this wish list that we have that aren't approved and in the budget, but if we can do.
If we can, and they want to prioritize what of on this list they want to put in the budget.
Anything else? All right, thanks, Ron. Appreciate it. Next, we have election of chairperson and vice chairperson. Vice Chair Hales, do you have any interest in either position retaining or being promoted?
I would be interested in retaining the vice chair.
Okay, all right. Then I'm good with, does somebody have a motion for chair?
I motion to nominate Mr. McCloy.
You accept?
Except.
Can you second yourself, please, or sir?
I'll second.
Thank you. You have a first and a second. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Bridgman?
Yes.
Mr. McCloy?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hales?
Yes.
Chair Banther?
Yes. Do we need to? Ms. Hells, it's fine, right? We don't need to reappoint her.
Well, we don't have to, but let's just do it.
Okay.
Since
Can I have a
it's on the
motion
agenda.
to appoint or continue Ms. Hales for vice chair?
I'll make the motion.
I second.
Okay, for a second roll call, please.
Mr. Bridgman?
Yes.
Mr. McCloy?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hales?
Yes.
Chair Banther?
Yes. This will be my final meeting, so I wish you all the best with the upcoming budget season. And we have any public comments? Seeing none, we don't have Zoom anymore, thank God. Staff comments?
Well, I'm sorry, you're looking. Want me to go ahead? I didn't know if you wanted to, did you want to start meeting next Thursday with the departments? I say Thursday, that's the days we've usually done them.
That's fine with
I'll
me.
yield to the chair and the vice chair now on that one.
I'm fine.
We usually do like the 4 Thursdays in a row, I think, right?
That's what we sort of marked in the calendar so far, the next at least 3 Thursdays we used to do it in 2 Thursdays, but I think the last couple of years it's taken about 3 Thursdays to get it all through.
I would say a minimum of 3.
Okay.
I'm good with,
Thursdays. So we'll start next Thursday at 2:00 and
The only problem for me is I have a prior commitment for next Thursday, so I wouldn't be here next Thursday.
All right. Is that it, Ron? You good for, you have any other comments, concerns, questions?
I'm good.
Thank you, Ron. All right, any kind of board comments?
In light of your resignation, or will a alternate be moved into a regular position?
We'll
or-
get it on the Board of Commissioners agenda.
Okay.
All right, good. Board comments, anybody? Everybody good? Your next meeting was established for Thursday, correct? Okay. Any future agenda items? That's it, okay. I will adjourn at 2:58 PM. Thank you.